Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Mad Mamluks podcast. My name is Sim. Along with me are my co-hosts, Mort and Hussam Gamia. We have a wonderful show for you this evening, but before we do that, let's get a quick business items out of the way. Give a quick shout out to our sponsors. HalfOurDeen.com is a place where you go for the private matrimonial experience. Get out of the swipe left, swipe right game and go to HalfOurDeen.com and get your profile set up in as little as 5 minutes. And WahidInvest.com is a website dedicated to Sharia compliant investing. Go to WahidInvest.com and download their convenient app that will allow you to manage your finances. MyWasiya.com is a website that was created by Sheikh Joe Bradford for the purposes of creating a Sharia compliant will. Go to MyWasiya.com and get your Sharia compliant will made in as little as 15 minutes. We should have a special discount offer in the description below. Make sure you click on that and save a few bucks. If you are new to the podcast, make sure you click on like or subscribe and click on that little bell up on top that'll notify you whenever we go live. And support us on patreon.com/the Mad Mamluks. Help us out. How you all doing? Hussam, Mort, what's happening? We got a new face on Mad Mondays. We got Hussam Gamia out of New York. He's an activist and a public organizer of sorts. What would you describe yourself as, Hussam?
I think we didn't. I don't know. So
kind of an activist, maybe, right?
I did my hand in like everything. So
very active on Twitter.
Yeah. Like writing, organizing, and activism. So those three mainly, yeah.
And you're still writing on Traversing Traditions as well, right?
Yeah.
So make sure you check out traversingtraditions.com.
Traversing Tradition.
Oh, sorry, no plural.
Yeah, no plural.
No plural. Tricksters, okay. Traversingtradition.com is a great blog for a lot of young students who I consider very bright and intelligent, and we're doing our best to collaborate with them and bring them more on our show and have some of these collaborative events so that we can talk about some of the hot button issues that are happening in the media right now. So right now we're like Twitter and the whole world was a buzz about Ilhan Omar today, Hussam, and it was. To my surprise, I thought it was shocking. I'm like, what did she actually say? And I actually went and looked, and it didn't seem like much. But I'm gonna go ahead and put it up on the screen for the viewers so that they can see the actual tweet. And she quotes a Puff Daddy tweet saying, "It's all about the Benjamins, baby," with some musical notes as an emoji, responding to Glenn Greenwald, talking about AIPAC, I believe, and GOP leader Kevin McCarthy threatens punishment for Ilhan and Rashida Tlaib over their criticisms of Israel. It's stunning how much time the U.S. political leaders spend defending a foreign nation, even if it means attacking free speech rights of Americans. Haaretz.com / So it's basically an Israeli website that he's linking, or a news outlet. But what were your initial thoughts about that, Hassan?
I mean, I've been seeing this a lot more recently lately, actually. I mean, it's always been common. But for whatever reason, even like I see it from like supposed like Israeli, anti-Israeli activists, quote unquote, or pro-Palestine activists, quote unquote, where they'll take any indication of or discussion about money in relation to Zionists and pointing out that money is being used to corrupt the discourse and to influence the discourse, and insist that it's anti-Semitic. And it's something that's just become very, very common and nefarious at this point, where people would just want to act like they're in denial about the fact that there are people with money who happen to be Jewish, and they use that money to advance, evil interests, just like many other billionaires and millionaires do of any other faith or denomination, right? Like, I'm not going to defend Saudi millionaires who, who funnel money into the war in Yemen or whatever, just because they happen to be Muslim and insist if you criticize them, it's Islamophobic. But that's become a very common thing, and it's being capitalized on constantly now by Zionists because anti-Semitism is on the rise in the U.S. or in Europe.
Yeah, I mean, look, when we, the Mad Mamluks, we've been critical about certain aspects of Ilhan Omar, or even
Yeah,
just politicians in a general. And many of our listeners might be surprised, thinking, "Why are you coming to the defense of Ilhan Omar when you guys have criticized her in the past for certain things that were antithetical to Islam?" And I don't want to get into them because that become another tangent. But
yeah.
what we want to do is, first of all, she said nothing wrong. It's completely obvious, and when she's our sister as well, and
Mhm.
she's coming in under attack by these Zionist organizations like AIPAC, we're going to come to her defense. It doesn't matter whether we agree with her or disagree with her or regarding other um, strategic uh, options that she takes in her candidacy. But what we're talking about is an unfair mischaracterization of her tweets and how the narrative is being changed. And I think what me and Mort have often talked about is how a lot of the narrative has completely changed in the way everyone is kind of just making themselves out to be a victim. It seems like we're in a time now that Israel is making themselves out to be a victim in the world, that they're so small and that they're surrounded by all these scary Arabs who most of them they're actually allies with, that
Yeah.
they don't publicly talk about, but they're for all intents and purposes they're
They're
allies.
starting to publicly talk about it now, though.
Right.
Like we know with the UAE, Saudi in the past has pretended to be, opposing Israel, but behind closed doors they've always had a good relationship. But even Mohammed bin Salman is starting to really be open about it. They know though the risk of that, right? They know that you know people in their countries hate Israel. Like that's just a fact.
Yeah.
Why do they hate Israel? Because Israel represents a colonizing power, a colonizing force in the region. They're like the last remnants of the colonizers in the Middle East, right? In the Muslim world, in Muslim countries, and they're like the difference is that it's an active colonization, whereas before, whatever you could argue rooted out the British and the French or whatever. But like with Israel, they're in active colonization process right now. They're actively ethnically cleansing the population and destroying their culture. And I think you make a good point about, Ilhan Omar. I mean, people know me. I'm very critical of politicians, of the Democratic Party, I've never voted for any politician. And for me, uh, it's not even, it's beyond Ilhan Omar. Like, it's not just about defending her. It's about defending the discourse, like defending the narrative as well, right?
Yeah.
And when you're defending the narrative, you need to look past those individuals and you need to think about who are the people affected by these narratives, right? And it's really Palestinian brothers and sisters overseas in Palestine, but also in the U.S., right? All the Palestine activists in the U.S. as well, and the Palestinians in the U.S., because then they get implicated in this if this starts getting set as a precedent. But I think lately, actually, and I remember we were going to talk. I was going to mention this in the last time I was here, but I didn't get to that. Zionists are really overstepping now. They're really overreaching because they realize it's becoming harder to defend Israel on any meritable argument, and so now they're reaching for these like small, potential victories or potential wins, and people are starting to see the BS. Like they're starting to see through it. The same thing happened with Mark Lamont Hill, where they were overstepping so much, he ended up on the Breakfast Club and he exposed like millions of people even more in detail about Palestine as a result, right? And told people to read up on it. And people are going to defend him because they see, a black man getting attacked for something that he didn't do, right? And it's all too reminiscent of the racism that many black people experience. And it's the same thing with Ilhan Omar. I mean, she's a black Somali refugee, right? And people are going to sympathize with that aspect of her identity beyond the fact that she's Muslim, right? And it's I think at the moment, the Zionist state, Israel itself, is really overstepping because they're insecure, but they're also really confident over, the fact that they're taking all the land in Palestine right now, and that they're actually starting to shift from like a two-state solution to a one-state solution of Israel being the one state. But the more they overstep, and subhanAllah, it's like Allah's throwing it back in their faces, I think, and it will eventually, I think, backfire on them.
Yeah, I'm gonna take a slightly different position here. Hey, Sim, I had sent something over to you to post in while we're talking about this. So, I'm looking at the Democratic leadership statement on the quote anti-Semitic comments of Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, and I put it in the Zoom chat just so you know. Sim.
Yeah.
Anyways, so this is what Nancy Pelosi comes out and says. We are and will always be strong supporters of Israel in Congress because we understand that our support is based on shared values and strategic interests. Legitimate criticisms of Israel's policies is protected by the values of free speech and democratic debate that the United States and Israel share. But Congresswoman Omar's use of anti-Semitic tropes and prejudicial accusations about Israel's supporters is deeply offensive. We condemn these remarks and we call upon Congresswoman Omar to immediately apologize for these hurtful comments. So, now, my problem with this is, number one, let's talk about it. Let's step outside of the issue of religion for one moment, okay? I am, Hassam, and Sim, we're all American citizens, right?
Yeah.
So what happened to America first? Why does the opinion of Israel matter to us at all? I don't care for your country. It's America first. I don't have to choose. And what's funny is that the fact that that she says that we will always be strong supporters of Israel, strategically and logically, that makes no sense at all. An ally today could be an enemy of yours tomorrow. You don't always support somebody unconditionally. It never works that way in politics. We never say we will unconditionally support Saudi Arabia, even though right now America and Saudi have had a very good relationship for decades, but they never say that about the Saudis. Why is that? So as far as being honest and transparent, this is a clear bias. And there's no way anyone can justify that if you want to put America first. The second thing to note here is that she's talking about legitimate criticism. And it's funny because these are just words for me, right? Because saying that Israel has a strong lobby in Washington that takes money to advance the Zionist cause is no secret. We have Big Pharma that does it. Yeah. We have, the NRA that does it. They're very clear about their objective. Their cause is to advance the struggle and to gain sympathy for Zionism. This is what they claim as their own mission statement. So why is saying that somebody who supports that has an interest in Israel first over America? It's clear. This is what the purpose of that lobby is to lobby for Israel, right? Their interest is not for America, it's for Israel. So for someone to call that out, it's not anti-Semitic. It's just simply calling it is what it is. Secondly, and then thirdly, the other thing is, this is very interesting. Mike Cernovich recently posted today on his Twitter feed, can someone be pro-American and anti-Israel, right? How could they be that way? So I posted a very simple response, and I said, listen, we've been allies with Saudi Arabia for a long time. We have helped them economically, militarily, and we even justify the crimes they do. So could I pose the same question and say, how could anyone be a patriotic American and oppose Saudi Arabia? No one asked that question ever, right? It doesn't come to anybody's mind. And I haven't gotten any response from them about that. And the reason why I bring this up is not to make like Israel and say Americans have to support Saudi Arabia or any of that. I don't support any of these governments. But the reality is that there's a double standard in how we present this. And I think what Ilhan Omar did was, regardless of what her personal opinions are on other things, in this particular matter, she's 100% right. If we should have the right to call out lobbies that have dual interests, that do not represent our interests as Americans and do not even align with us politically. That's a fundamental right in America. And that the notion that we should somehow curb our free speech because it somehow offends somebody doesn't make any sense at all. You don't have the right to be offended in America. There's no such thing that prevents that speech,
Yeah,
right? They can say what.
I tweeted out to free speech advocate Sam Harris, like, hey, I wonder if you would be willing to support Ilhan Omar's right for free speech regarding this latest tweet, because he's one of those people who would be the first one, as long as it's
He's
under
paid by
hi-
he's paid by them
under
too.
yeah under under his own ideology. He's the
Yeah.
first one to defend their free speech, or their right for hate, or whatever Islamophobic statements that people want to make. He's the first one out there, screaming like a little girl about how Muslims are screaming about Islamophobia for benign tweets, or whatever. So I was wondering, like, if you're really intellectually honest, then you
Yeah.
should be defending this.
You know, one thing before I let Hassan make his point is that when I heard this, you know what came to my mind? There was a 1963 speech by Malcolm X, and he says, in America, there is no more white Democrat and white Republican. There's only the white conservative and the white liberal. And the only difference between the two is the white liberal will deceive you and blind you and try to use you for their agenda. And the white conservative is in your face about it, but they both want power. Now, granted, I'm not making this issue about race or not, but it's indicative. It's very true about how the Democratic Party plays its games today in identity politics. They don't care about you. As long as you fit their narrative, they will check you off and say, yeah, good boy, you did what we wanted you to do. We're going to support you. And then the minute they don't need you, and the minute you say something they don't like,
That's out of the party line.
yes, exactly, is when they begin to demonize you, and you see their true colors come out. And this is what I've been saying for a long time. You, as a Muslim, cannot keep true to your values if you align with the Democratic Party. They will come back and they will bite you like snakes behind you. You won't even know they bite you, but they will throw you under the bus quicker than you can say bus.
That was one of the first things. I'm glad you brought that up, Mort, because I was thinking about that too. I mean, I'm not subscribing the Muslim agenda to go into politics, but let's just say you are, and you want to make you feel that you can make change in that respect. You've ultimately seen what the Democratic Party does to people who really put the most mildest of tweets. It wasn't even nothing close to hate. It was something that was purposely made to be interpreted as hate. She had zero anti-Semitic.
What's wrong about saying it's all about the Benjamins? It's just it's funny.
You know what it is also.
So now let's get this straight. Anytime you say anything related to money and Zionism, or money and these PACs that, or some of these, what are they called? The word's escaping me. These groups that
Lobbyists.
Yeah,
Super
these lobbyists.
PACs?
Anytime you use the financial terms and lobbying groups, you are in effect anti-Semitic.
It's really ridiculous. And I mean, also, one thing, that they can't get away with now, because social media is just too big. You can't control social media like you can control news cycles, right?
Right.
You could try to manipulate it, but people can go read the tweet themselves. Right, people can go out of their way and read the tweet themselves. They're not given the tweet that CNN decides the tweet looks like, or that MSNBC decides the tweet looks like. Now you can go read the tweet yourself, and the more they push, people can only act stupid for so long. The more you recognize it's ridiculous, right? And I think people are starting to recognize it's ridiculous. And one thing I do want to give props to Rashid Talib and Ilhan Omar, because I really thought they would really be weak on these issues. Like, I was really family, because usually people will promote a platform on Palestine, and then once they get into prominence, Palestine is just like forgotten to them, right?
Well, yeah, I was worried as well, Hussam. I thought because J Street was funding or gave some money towards Rashida Tlaib's campaign.
Yeah, but she like denounced them or something.
Yeah, she ended up returning that money back.
And her and Ilhan, surprisingly, and props to them on this, because you are in an island in government when you do take these kinds of positions. Ilhan on her intervention and war stances, even though I don't agree at all with her framing of she didn't talk about Syria. I don't agree with her promoting the people who frame Syria in that light, but that's like a position you can't take in politics and government. And I think it's courageous to some extent that her and Rashida have taken some of these positions on Palestine and the wars. And I think it's important that a big reason why when Muslims get into politics, they start cowering under the pressures because there's no support system for them when they start pushing tides or pushing the waves, right?
Well, Sam, you just brought up an important point, because during this, during the past 24 hours since she was been going through this pressure,
she apologized.
Yeah, she apologized, but we didn't see anyone of prominence
mention that.
Yeah. I mean, no Muslim really backed her up.
That's
You saw some people like Glenn Greenwald kind of helping her out, and other people, but
that's almost a man tweet out also an article about the Israeli lobby, and this is the thing. This is the problem in our community. People get thrown to the dust once they're unpopular. That's it. Forget you. I don't care what the issue is that you became unpopular for, even if it's a righteous cause. We're going to ignore your existence, or we're not going to support you. And that's why I can't blame when Muslims go into politics entirely on those corruption in those people when they go into politics. But I can't blame it entirely on those individuals, because we as a community do not provide them a support system to go above and beyond, right? We don't support, like, when you see these Zionists, when they're attacked, they come in droves in defense of each other, right? Because they have like an organized network. And I think that's a problem that Muslims need to have, is they need to have more organized support systems, and that will empower the scholars, the activists, the politicians to speak actual truth to power, not a curated, cut down version. Because if you have no support system, then you're alone on an island. And that's like a really scary island to be on. And this kind of opens up a whole can of worms, in my opinion. You had the issue with Mark Lamont Hill. He got attacked, but he got support, to be honest. He got a lot of support from his community. But you have a lot of Muslim organizations who've been attacked by these Zionist lobbies, like these people. They claim like they're against Islamophobia and they're allies to Muslims and all this stuff. It's BS. We just did a report in New York. There was just a report released about a prominent Jewish organization called UJA Federation, who spent $2 million funding Islamophobes, like prominent Islamophobes, like Pamela Geller, Steve Emerson, I think Daniel Pipes, even Jihad Watch, all these websites, and they funded them, and then they are the biggest organizers of interfaith work.
Wow.
Like, we don't like. There's deep exploitation of the Muslim community by many of these organizations. And when these people come out and say, "Oh, it's anti-Semitic to attack these organizations, these these bodies and governments because there happens to be Jews there," that's actually anti-Semitic, because you're implying that by me attacking them because of these problems, that it is the essence of a Jew to be corrupt, a liar, and to cheat people. Right, and to manipulate them, and to throw them under the bus like that, and to be oppressive. That's anti-Semitic. You're saying that's essential to Jewness. It's like if I said it's Islamophobic to attack Saudi for what they're doing in Yemen. Oh, is it Islamic to bomb? Is it in the essence of Islam and Muslims to bomb Yemeni children, or little children? Like, it's a really nonsensical argument. I think.
Well, the thing is that it's not an argument based on logic.
It's not.
It's an argument based on the fact that they're trying to manipulate a narrative, right? Yeah. They know that it doesn't make sense. They know all of these things.
And if
the reality is that they just don't want that to happen, right? In my opinion, I think this should be a great wake up call for the Muslims. Abandon this liberal Democratic Party. Abandon them. Turn your backs on them.
Well, would you recommend going independent, Mort?
Yeah, independent. Or if you want to go independent, but say, listen, we are not going to vote for you Democrats. We're going to talk about you. We're going to expose you. We're going to say how you are liars, deceivers. You guys are the spawns of Satan until you guys actually give us our rights. I'm serious.
But here's the thing, More. They're not here. The way it works in politics is that they get money, and you get funded in your campaigns.
There's a huge movement of a black exodus out of the Democratic Party right now. Why is that? They're turning their doors and saying, you Democrats have never, ever supported us. Our black communities have been down because of Democratic controlled areas. You guys were responsible for the KKK. You guys were in the South early on. All they basically blame them. We have lower unemployment under Trump. We have more black kids in college under Trump, right? So they're saying, hey, listen, you Democrats have screwed us up for a long time. You guys made identity politics. You guys had Jim Crow in the South, right? I mean, granted that the Democratic Party at that time is different, but the reality is that they're going back to what Malcolm X said, that, hey, they're just sneaky. They have these nice, kind words, but when push comes to shove, they don't care about you. They want to use you as a political pawn. So I think Muslims should also adopt the same thing and say, hey, you Democrats, you're not fooling us anymore. We don't like you. You're a snake. Get away from us. We're going to vote on policies. We don't trust you.
I think Muslims, especially in very Muslim-dominant areas, when it comes to local politics, there's no reason you have to be under the Democratic platform per se, because you're in a Muslim-dominated area. You could win. I think Ilhan Omar could probably be able to win. I don't know if in her congressional district, yeah, she could probably win if she went.
There's Somali in Minnesota.
Somali Muslim woman. She doesn't have to take up the Democratic platform. But I mean, beyond that, I think the Democrats. I think on the ground, on the local level, what we should start doing is we should start thinking more strategically. This is something that I speak with Raja about, Abdul Haq about a lot, because we're kind of in that whole mix, the grassroots level versus political level and everything. Is what does the Muslim community need in terms of substance, like in terms of substantial policy changes? And I think a big thing that Muslims can start working on is being very strategic about which candidates they choose and for what reasons, for what particular issues, right? Because a politician saying, I support Muslims, that doesn't mean anything, right? Well, you know what? We'll vote for you if you have this specific policy that for this community, we'll support you in that, okay? And then we'll vote for you for that. They're not going to reject votes, right? But at the same time, it's about also thinking strategically. You're not indebted to the politician. The politician is indebted to you. And if you start thinking in that way, then you stop getting like these like brain dead or like, these.
Yeah, we don't have an inferiority complex. We don't feel like that.
These inferiority complex. You have to think strategic. And, there's a lot of, I want to go into this because I think it's important, forgetting Ilhan Omar for now. But there are some leaders in our community who were that kind of strategic minds, who had that kind of strategic mind, like Dr. Samuel Arian. I don't know if you guys know of him. You might know of him. I think he was based in Chicago for a little bit.
Right.
He was affiliated, I think, with Triple IT, Islamic. I forgot what
Institute of
Intellectual Thought or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I forgot what it was exactly. Islamic Institute of Thought or something like that. It was something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Like with Ismail Farouki, who was also based in, I think, Chicago, but is an offshoot of his, ideas. He was somebody who was a very, very good. He was a big Palestinian activist. He's very strong on his deen. He was a very, very influential leader, right? Like he was like in terms of his strategic mind, he was like a once in a generation type of mind. And he was, working on a campaign to get rid of secret evidence, which the idea was that the courts would use secret evidence. They can't reveal to the court, to the people, what the evidence is against an individual to send them to jail.
Just so people understand, in normal court proceedings, you have to present the evidence.
Yes, okay? Exactly.
And in the 90s and early 2000s, they had special rules that, and I'm not sure how much it's continuing today, so maybe you can elaborate, but what they were doing was that you don't have to present the evidence. It's sensitive to the state or to government or to federal interest or whatever.
Yeah, it's like confidential information that if we reveal, people would be in danger or whatever. And so basically that's like a free ticket to send somebody to jail for life or whatever, right? And you can't defend yourself. There's no way you can defend yourself against secret evidence. And so he was working on a campaign to get that rid of. And he was going to get it. He was going to get it through the Republicans, actually, of all people. Like, that's how strategically minded and like that's how great he was at, moving the balls around, like building these specific purpose purpose-driven alliances, right? These purpose-driven goals, not allies for the sake of allies or whatever, but these very purpose-driven, goal-oriented.
It's policy based. It's not just partisan based.
Yeah, and the thing is, he was about to get it done, and then in 2011, 9/11 happened when they were about to announce, or whatever the secret evidence is going to be ruled as unconstitutional or whatever. They're going to push a law against it, and then it was scrapped, and then he was charged with something related with terrorism, and all these instances like him, and the story of the Holy Land Foundation 5. If you guys know about them, the Holy Land Foundation were the biggest charity organization before Islamic Relief. They were the biggest one in the country, and they were also charged on false. They were put as designated as terrorist organization 2001, and the five of the founders have been sent to prison. Have been in prison since on nonsense, right? And a lot of these motions were pushed by Zionist organizations and Zionist lobbies, right? Like the ADL. Same thing with Mark Lamont Hill. The ADL were the ones who contacted CNN, and they're the ones who pushed CNN to fire Mark Lamont Hill. And it was only through their suggestions that CNN fired him, right? So to act like the Muslim community is not deeply affected by the actions of these people, by the actions of these institutions, and I'd argue that's Islamophobic if you're going to call.
What you just said, if you were in office right now, they would say, "Oh, so what you're saying is the Jews have control over Holy Land." No, but that's what they're when they say anti-Semitic language. That's what they're implying. They're saying Hossam here is saying that Zionists or Jews are in control of money and in control of organizations like Holy Land Foundation. They know where that money is traveling to, so hence this is what he's saying, and they just completely make a red herring out of it. I mean, this is one of a logical fallacy that you learn when you're kind of studying how logical fallacies are made. You're trying to make a point, but they kind of divert you into making trying to make you defend something that you weren't even actually talking about. So
yeah, and the crazy thing about the Holy Land Foundation, a lot of these cases use that similar type of faulty logic. With Holy Land Foundation, if you read up on it, it was a ridiculous claim. They were claimed that Holy Land was based in Palestine. They had offices in parts of Palestine and in the U.S. I think in California originally, then in Texas, and they were the biggest charity organization. So they were sending charity money to Palestine because Palestinians need charity money, right? They had zakat foundations, and those zakat foundations were being used to build hospitals, community centers, and improve the overall community infrastructure, help with poverty in the area, right? And so they were saying, well, that money came and it built hospitals, and those hospitals and those things that were built it created a goodwill between the Palestinian people and Hamas, and then Hamas got elected into government. Therefore, Holy Land Foundation helped a terrorist organization, provided material support to a terrorist organization because their work resulted in aiding Hamas indirectly.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous, man. It's really ridiculous.
So we're from Chicago. You're talking about Holy Land Foundation and all that.
No, Holy Land Foundation is not in Chicago.
Sorry.
That was in Texas.
Who was in Chicago? The one.
I said Dr. Samuel Ariana. I think he was based in Chicago for a bit. Yeah.
No, there was another organization in Chicago that got shut down. Not Holy Land, but I can't remember. But this in the 90s, a lot of these charity organizations were getting shut down, and this was some really amazing brothers who were. When you knew that they would never talked about violence or anything, all they did was send charity or any kind of humanitarian support back home, and what they did was they tried to make a connection that the food was going to Hamas or something like that, and they would say that this is a organization that's supporting terrorism.
Islamic Relief USA was shut down. That's the equivalent of what happened to the Holy Land Foundation. Yeah. And then the leadership of Islamic Relief were all sent to prison, and the Muslim community does not make a sound about it anymore. That's exactly what happened with the Holy Land Foundation, right? And it was criminalizing them because of their work on Palestine. That was a big thing, and there were big lobby groups against them as well because of that. Same thing with Dr. Sami Aryan. He was a Palestinian activist who was very politically astute, and they didn't like him for it, right? And this is the problem, is that we lack leadership because our leaders keep on getting attacked, keep on getting undermined, and sometimes get jailed for life. Dr. Sami, alhamdulillah, he was extradited, I think, to Turkey, and so he's out of jail, but he's exiled. He can't come to the U.S. anymore, and because they got like a deal or something. But beyond that, like we lack leadership because our leaders get taken away from us, and it's a deliberate attempt to weaken our community, because our community is the strongest supporting community of many of these causes. It's going to be the strongest supporting community against the wars. It's going to be the strongest supporting community against what's happening in Palestine. And by extension, because of our sense of justice on these issues, it can, when other issues may resonate with us as well, like issues with race relations in the U.S. or any other issues of that, equivalence, or what's the word I'm looking for, something comparable, because we have a precedence for dealing with it. It can result in much more change than they want and anticipate. And so, but right now we're being thrown along with everybody else. We're not leading the way.
Yeah. By the way, I remember the charity from Chicago. I don't know if you remember. It's called Benevolence.
I never heard of it.
Benevolence.
Oh, I remember that one.
Remember Palos Hills Mart? I think what was
Benevolence Foundation.
Mohammed Bayazid, I think. I can't remember exactly, but yeah, this was one of the charities in Chicago.
Yeah, I remember that one. Benevolence Foundation.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were a 501c. Yeah, I remember them. Yeah, I mean, look, I think my personal take on this is that we've all, for a long time, have recognized that the Zionist lobbies will do whatever they want to do to try to undermine the efforts of Muslim organizations and politicians and activism. My I think solution is that what happens is that we should just that should actually make the community become stronger and more active in vocalizing their disgust with the way that they try to control our narrative, right? Meaning that you should, I'm not saying we have to go out and say just, burn Israeli flags, or it has nothing to do with it, right? Yeah. I'm not saying that. But we should call out parties like the Democratic Party that have a double standard when it comes to things like this, and say, hey, if you want us to like you guys, then you better give us a product, i.e., your platform, that we agree with or we like. Otherwise, don't come to us with that garbage. We don't want it. We know you're a snake in the grass. You guys are wolves in sheep's clothing.
That works if we have good leaders to do that. But the issue is all of our good leaders.
No, but I'm thinking like this. Forget about even leaders, because at the end of the day, leaders can tell you one thing, right? But at the end of the day, each individual person who is involved politically in the country, they are individual voters, right? They have the right and say, listen, look, if you come out and say collectively on Twitter campaign, a Twitter storm campaign, hey, look, we as Muslims are boycotting the Democratic Party until they get their stuff together. We don't want nothing to do with them. We don't buy your lies. You have a double standard, and we won't tolerate it anymore. Right?
I think you just brought up a really good point, Morton, in terms of just making sure that we know that we can't really influence leaders or people who are community organizers in essence. They've kind of formed their thoughts politically, and they already have their objectives. They're never going to change their course.
But wait, to be fair, they also have their distinct challenges. There are different types of pressures.
Right.
They have. So I don't want to take this time to blame them for this, but what I'm saying is this: imagine if you have 15,000 Muslims on Twitter that are tweeting saying, "Hey, ignore the Democratic Party," and you make this hashtag, right, going around.
It has to be organized. That's the thing. That's what I'm saying.
Right. But the thing is that
you need people to organize people, and the problem is that the people who would organize won't do that because they benefit financially by falling into the party line, right? Like,
so the people that won't do it are the ones that are leaders, right? I'm saying, if, like, for example, if this podcast were to say that and say, "Hey, start this hashtag, get it known, because we're trying to make
we can do that."
You know what I mean? We're
Yeah.
trying to make a statement. No, and what
We're
I'm not
nowhere
saying
near the kind of influence that
no,
could
we're not.
generate
We're
that,
not.
but
No.
yeah,
No. Wait a minute. Understand my point. This
yeah.
is what I'm trying to get to you guys the whole time.
Yeah.
It doesn't. We may not have to influence 1 million or 2 million people, but if we can influence 5,000 people and they retweet and they reshare, and then other people will also sign on from other groups, like for example, perhaps maybe some of the Latin Americans, they'll say, you know what? Yeah, the Democratic Party has pretty much, used us as pawns too. The Black community will say, hey, they use us as pawns too, right? I mean, they'll jump on and say, hey, look, these guys have it right. Look at these Muslims. The Democrats have been raving and ranting about Muslims and how they love Muslims all the time, but they're calling them out. You don't think like people like Mike Cernovich should come out and be like, hey, check these guys out. They're calling the Democrats on their double face and their two-facedness.
What you're talking about is being strategic, and I agree. And the problem is though, that it's going to take work. I'm not saying I'm not even saying it's impossible, but it is going to take time and work. And we need to start shifting. This is an on the ground issue, in my opinion, where we need to start shifting people's minds on the ground from the masajid, from the school.
Yeah, but Hussam, one thing. I just want to say this one thing.
The problem is that we need to start, almost, leaders, they need to recognize what they're doing is destroying our community. It's not saving us, not protecting them. It's destroying us in the akhirah, right? It's not, forget the dunya, it's destroying us in the akhirah.
Yeah, I just want to say this one thing. That's fine and dandy that we should try to encourage our leaders and elders and encourage community activism. But what I'm saying is now in the age of social media,
no, of course, yeah,
and recognition, an individual person can simply send out a tweet saying, hey, I'm a Muslim and I think the Democratic Party is disgusting, right, for doing that, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter about how many people you have following you or how many others do it. Voice your opinion. This is what I mean when we're talking about mobility in politics. You shouldn't have to depend on a party or anyone else to voice your opinion.
I agree.
What you feel.
Yeah,
and let it be known.
Yeah, but the issue is you have more incentives right now within the community and outside of the community not to do that. And I'm saying we at least need to start developing incentives within the community, or at least a mindset within the community where doing openly supporting Palestine and stuff like that is a practice that we encourage, not something that we discourage. Because at the moment, you have people when they start getting involved into Palestine work or any type of work, related to, challenging kind of these powerful entities, they're blacklisted, right? It's hard for them to find job. I could not find a job for 2.5 years because I was on I believe it's because I was on the Canary mission. And first thing you do when you Google my name is like this big thing saying I'm anti-Semitic. Even though if you read the contents, there's nothing. I don't say anything stupid on there. So, like these kinds of incentives that people are incentivized against, it's like working against your own best interest. And I think if we start fostering this is why grassroots work is really important beyond social media, is that when you incentivize a community, an empowered community that protects itself, that is more self-sustaining, that can identify these problems and work on it as a community together to deal with them, it becomes a lot easier to organize. It's a lot harder to get there than like a social media campaign, but social media campaigns are very what's the word? They're like short-term effective. They're short-term effective, but they're not long-term effective. Like you could use it to attack one specific issue, right? But you can't use it to alter the discourse overall in the long term, unless there's like some concerted power behind it. Which you see with like a lot of discourses, like with like this discourse on Semitism, anti-Semitism shifting, is because of the influencers involved, the money that they get. I think your idea works, especially if we attack the influencers, if we encourage those influencers.
But that's how pressure works, all right? You say there's a mounting pressure against them. You have
to pressure them.
Like, for example, listen, the Muslim community the influencers, they rely heavily on the Muslim base. Non-Muslims don't support them, right? People like Omar Salman or people like that, they heavily rely on the Muslim base.
Well, somebody like Omar Salman, I would say he's more of an exception.
No, I'm not saying him. I mean, in terms of what I'm just using it as an example of an influencer, right? I'm saying someone like that caliber, his power and authority depends on how much the Muslim community supports him, right? Mm-hmm. This is really what it comes down to. So if you have a whole Twitter campaign saying, listen, a Muslim saying, hey, Omar, you better say something like this, or you can't be silent. We're not going to tolerate that. We don't want community leaders like this who stay silent on important issues. You're not
Yeah.
fit for us, right? And I think that kind of pressure, because ultimately what
Yeah, I
happens in
agree.
politics, Hassam, it's all about pressure. Do you think most of these politicians care about most of these issues? They don't.
No,
They're
they don't.
pressured into doing it, and that pressure comes from bottom up, right?
Yeah,
It
yeah,
builds up.
exactly. Grassroots. Yeah.
Influence these if you pressure these community influencers, they reach out to their contacts and they say, hey, look, we're getting
Yep.
pushback, and then it goes up and up and up, and the pressure
Yeah.
builds up like a
Yeah.
like a
We
pot, right?
we need people who are organizing, who are good organizers, and who are working towards the right causes. A lot of the organizing is going towards bad causes, because they're getting money for it. And
Yeah.
so part of this responsibility is also on the Muslim community to help support those good organizers, right? Those people who are working for the benefit of the community, right? And that's a big problem actually, where you have a lot of people that are up and coming, they're really promising, but then you lose them to kind of external forces because they're not paid well, they're not taken care of by the community, they're not respected, they're not, uplifted or empowered by their community. So other people empower them happily because, oh, I got my token Muslim now, I got this person I could just use as an image, right? And then at that point, their follower base is no longer even Muslims. It's mostly non-Muslims who think they're supporting Muslims, right? Which is what you see with a lot of these people. Like I can
And they're
imagine.
only supporting because it aligns with their view. It's not actually like, oh, we support
Yeah,
Muslims.
yeah, they support them because they represent a symbol for them where it's like, well, I'm supporting Muslims by supporting this person, and they align with my view, like you said. And at that point, they don't rely on their Muslim following base anymore either, right? Like that's it. They don't care about the Muslims anymore. So we have to start before they even get to the point where they're at that level, I think, as well. On top of simultaneously, like we do multiple things at once, doing what you're talking about, the organizing aspect on social media and pressuring the current influencers on social media. But even before they become influencers, we need to protect those leaders in our community and make sure that they're uplifted economically and they're uplifted on a social level and protected on a social level where they don't feel like they're going to be abandoned if anything happens to them, right? um and just to be clear for anybody who Shaitan would be talking, I'm not talking about myself or anything like that, right? Like, I'm not
Yeah.
talking about myself in terms of being benefiting economically or whatever, anything like that. What I mean is that support their projects, support their initiatives, support what they're doing, so that they don't look for that money elsewhere. They don't look for these support systems elsewhere and then get manipulated. A lot of these people get sucked in when they're young, when they're like 17, 18, 19, 20. It is not when they're 40. It's very rare when it gets to that age. But nowadays they're trying to take these people from us at a young age. And I don't mean Jews, all right, for people like try to take it out of context. By that I mean like left-wing or democratic establishments, identitarians, and Zionist organizations as well, with like MLI as an example, Muslim Leadership Initiative. And it's starting to have an effect in our community. You're starting to see a lot of a shift. There's shifts on issues like these issues. Like Palestine was a really core. It was a no discussion issue in the 90s and 2000, early 2000s. Nobody would ever. You could not be a Muslim and say even probably a two-state solution would not be a thing of Muslims back then. Like Muslims back then were very staunchly supportive of these causes. Nowadays, there's Muslims who will support Israel. Like that's unheard of. That was unheard of. Like this is starting to become a lot more common now.
Yeah.
You see it with MSAs and everything, right?
I remember that was like an insult to somebody. Like, hey, you support Israel. I'm like, what? Those were fighting words, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like not anymore. Like that's like that's a discussion we can have. No, man. These are core issues. We need to have red lines in our community.
Yeah. Hey, I just want to address a comment. Someone was like, you know what? I find these discussions intellectually dissatisfying, and I don't like contemporary political issues. Well, let me explain something to you. If you ignore these political issues in your community, I don't know what part of the world you live in, but these are issues that affect us directly. And if you ignore these issues and try to sweep it under the rug, we're going to end up taking the backseat on everything, right? Maybe you don't have children or you don't have a future generation to worry about at this moment in time, but you're talking about a culture and a society that will influence your children in a certain way and the future community and generations. So it's important, just as it is important to be aware of your religion and the issues of religion. It's equally important to be aware of your surroundings and what's happening around you. Living life
These are
in
issues of
ignorance is
religion
not a
too.
bliss.
These are
Right?
these are issues of religion too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
of course. But essentially, yes. But at the same time, they obviously get muddied with politics sometimes. But
yeah, but I'm saying like
rooted,
politics, because religion, deen wise, deen is supposed to encompass how we engage with the world, right? So everything that we do in some aspect is always going to be related to the religion. Every single decision you make in your life ideally should be influenced by the deen, right? So these issues, they're all part of your deen. You could be questioned on them. You could be punished by Allah for
of
ignoring these
course.
issues. Think about that. That's scary, right? Like, how many issues do you go in your day-to-day life you might be ignoring entirely, that you have the capacity to do something about, and because you treat it as small or insignificant, you may be asked about it.
And you know the other thing about it is this.
He does not forget. Allah doesn't forget, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
and the other thing about it is this as well too. It shows that you have a genuine interest in the affairs of Muslims,
yes,
right?
exactly.
It shows that you are part of a community, that you actually care about
Yes,
us as a community. If you just want to live like a hermit, and isolate yourself and not worry about things that affect you directly, then that kind of shows being, hey, I don't really care about anybody else but myself. As long as I'm living good, I have a job, I don't really care. That's a very selfish way of going through society. And I think that we should encourage Muslims to be more unified and have a more community type vision rather than individualism, because one of the ways the left has destroyed communities is by individualism.
mm-hmm.
Saying, hey, you know what? Do what you want to do. Whatever you feel good, whatever feels good for you, go ahead and do it. If you want to put a 5-inch gap in your earlobe and walk around and go to work, go ahead and do it, right? I'm just giving an example, right? But generally in societal norms, you're like, hey, that's kind of weird. Why would you want to do that, right? But they're saying, no, don't worry about that. Don't worry about your community as a whole. Just do what makes you feel good. And for us as Muslims, we're exactly the opposite. We look at what's good for the ummah as a whole, right? Yeah. One of the biggest things in Islam is being part of the jama'ah, right? Yeah. Not leaving the jama'ah, right? Not to be isolated and to be worried about yourself alone and nobody else's issues are your concern. We don't think that. Everybody knows the famous hadith about if one portion of the body is ailing, then the entire body is ailing. Everybody knows about this, right? Yes. So think about that when you're thinking about these political issues. I'm not telling you to go be a politician and all the stuff, but I'm saying be aware of them for your own sake.
The term politics, a lot of times it has a dirty connotation. People think about, complicated issues that, that kind of go over their head. But politics is, in essence, means taking care of the affairs of the people. And that's really what it means at its core. And that's something that from the Prophet ﷺ to his Sahaba and so on, they all were concerned with that subject. And that's something that we as Muslims need to know about. We don't need to know every single detail. You don't need to know every single House of Representative member and all the different committees within the government, but have a general idea of how to explain things to your kids or people who ask you questions like, well, what's your stance on this? And you should be able to intelligently give some kind of answer so that you can be coherent, I guess, and explain how Muslims feel about certain things. And that's something that's one of our challenges too. If there's difficulty on your end, let us know, and maybe we can get the right expert on to explain that to you. So, and I know there's someone in the chat who was talking about that earlier on, and that's something that is a mission of ours.
Yeah, if anybody has any people that they suggest to bring on the show to talk about some of these issues and give us a breakdown for the average. I mean, I'm a layman as well too in this. I mean, I know the basics of it, how the government works, but if you want to go in the deep, if you're going to go deep into it, I'll probably be just as ignorant as you guys, but I'm just aware politically about certain things. But I think it's important, considering that you live here, this is your environment, it's important to know what shapes your environment, right? I mean, it would make sense, right? When you go to any new country, you would never just sit there and be like, I don't care about what's happening around me. No, you're going to be on your guard, right? You're going to know how to navigate through that society. It's important for you, right? It's simple.
Right.
That's what I think.
So you guys have any last thoughts on that? Can we move on?
No, I think we can transition to that next
All right.
thing.
So recently, um, Dr. Khalid Bediüen out of New York, he got into a situation
Is it
that
New York? Is Detroit?
or is
It's
it? It might
Detroit.
be Detroit. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm thinking New York because Sam's from New York.
Hey,
But
man, don't compare me to him. No, I'm joking.
oh man,
Well, I'm
He's
from New
from
York.
what I
He's from New
hear,
York, so maybe that's why.
from what I hear about Dr. Khalid, he's apparently a sweetheart, and he's very
No, I'm joking. I'm
he's a
joking.
very nice guy.
I just disagree with him on
But
this.
I just have to include that caveat just before we enter some of the before we enter the commentary of this next segment because
Okay.
so he got into a scuffle on a Delta Airlines flight. At the end of the flight, he wanted to issue a complaint. So he put this on his Twitter about how he was trying to issue a complaint to a pilot, and then the pilot opened the door and he shoved him or grabbed him by his neck or something, and made him have a seat. But apparently he was unhappy with where he was being seated, and he was being relocated somewhere else, and he wanted to issue a complaint to the pilot. The pilot was not happy about that, and he said that this is most likely discrimination against a brown man, and he made a lot of different tweets in referencing to his minority status as a Muslim, and
And the brown man.
yeah, he said he used the term brown man, and well, here's the thing: when I saw that, it just reminded me of the whole. Do you remember the Coke Zero thing, Hussam? Do you remember Coke Zero? The Coke Zero issue?
Are you talking about Pepsi or
No. It
Pepsi?
was Coke Zero on one of these airlines where a Muslim sister sent a complaint to. Was it United? I think.
I never heard this.
Yeah.
No.
It was Coke Zero
I think it's American Airlines, I think.
she was asking for a Coke Zero, and they gave her an open can or a half can, and then she said something about that they made a comment regarding Muslims or something, and she blew it out of proportion.
Totally false.
And even Muslims on that flight said that it had nothing to do with Muslims or anything. She was just being plain rude to the flight attendant, and this is how the whole thing escalated. And it kind of made me think, like, when me, Mort, or you, Hussam, we go on these flights all the time. We don't have any issues, and why is it that these prominent Muslim figures who are, who have very active social media accounts for all intents and purposes, end up getting into these scuffles? And I'm not going to say this about this particular incident, but it seemed a little disingenuous. It just seems like of all the probabilities of many different people happening, this type of thing happening to, why is it only happening to you guys?
Wait, Sim, can I just be honest for a moment? I just want to take a second. I don't know this guy. I mean, I've heard of him. This is nothing against you if you're listening, Khalid. Nothing against you at all. But I think Muslims need to stop playing the victim stuff too much. It's too far, right? I get there's legit Islamophobia, but if you make things like this into Islamophobia, people will not take real Islamophobia seriously, right? Don't imply that something happened because of your name and because of your color, because of this, unless somebody said something to you directly, right? Unless you can prove it, don't say it. Otherwise, what happens is that people just, it
delegitimizes other people's real events, and
like
we're not saying Islam
right now gets blown out of proportion, right? They'll say, "Oh, whatever, who cares?" Right? Because all the Muslims cry all the time, and everything's Islamophobia, right? We don't want that to happen. Look, I'll give you a similar example. Ann Coulter, the one who said that she wants to invade Mexico and then put a 1 mile border and shoot all Mexicans, stuff like this. She, a right-wing conservative commentator, was forced to move from her first class seat to the back seat, even though she paid for it and everything, because of an emergency, meaning they had to accommodate. And she was whining and complaining, and all the Republicans came out, and even liberals came out and said, "Hey, you're always talking about people complaining all the time. Why are you complaining about this?" And I think what I'm trying to say is that it happens to even conservative people, even like right wingers. It happens on planes, right? Hey, look, there might have been an emergency. In my opinion, I think he could have taken the time out to be, to be an example and say, "Hey, look, if it's a legit emergency and you need me to move to the back of the seat, fine. no problem. And if you had a legit complaint, why don't you go up to the airline at the end and say, hey, look, I just want to know what the emergency was, and why I had to be moved on a flight. Was there something really that happened? And you can confirm. And if you find out that there was no emergency or anything, at that point you can maybe get some, litigation involved, whatever. But to make a scene and to say, oh, it's because I'm Muslim and because I'm this, it actually makes it, to me, in my opinion, it works against you, because people will say, oh, he's just crying. He wants special privileges because he's a Muslim, right? You see what I'm trying to say? You have to be careful.
Yeah. So I think a few things. So I think somebody like Khaled Baidoun, not necessarily Khaled Baidoun, but more prominent people may face more dangers at the airport. I think that's a valid thing that will probably occur. I don't fly out much, actually. I have not. Last time I flight out was in the summer. Before that, I hadn't flown on a plane since I was like 14. So, and when I flew out, I did have a extra security check on my ticket, but when I came, it was really late. It was like 12 a.m. So I think they may have not they may have not potentially done extra checks because of the time of night or something. I don't know, but I do know people personally who always get checked every time they go to the airport and always get discriminated against in some capacity or taken off the line or whatever. As for Khaled Baidoun, Allahu Alam, I'm going to use like Husn al-Dhan to some extent. He says that the guy choked him. The manager choked him, or I forgot what it was. He said the pilot or something. Somebody choked him. That's what he said, right? Wow. In the tweet. If somebody choked him, that's different. That's a different, that's a different level. I can imagine why he would feel like that's discrimination on top of the emergency thing. Now, you're right about some prominent people using these kinds of situations for clout. Like, I think it was Adam Saleh was somebody who tried to do something like that. His was just like a straight up lie. Like, it wasn't even like
yeah, that guy he's just a YouTube prankster or
But I don't want to go into too much detail. I don't want to feel like I'm hating.
No, but you know what?
There's
just
other
to make
people.
a comment though, if he was choked in fact, right? If he in fact was choked, we condemn that, right? No matter what, you're a pilot of an airline. You have no business putting your hands on somebody. You guys went in the air. You could have called security and had him escorted, right? Choking a passenger on your airline who's a guest on your airline, there's no excuse for that, right?
I think
he was indeed choked. That's wrong, 100% wrong. I would agree that he should press charges on that airline official.
Yeah, I think also we need to. There's two things. I know there's two narratives in the Muslim community right now on stuff like Islamophobia, where it's about we need to stop being victims or victimizing ourselves. But I do think there's a discussion about, there's an element here of dignity. I do think it's not wrong that when you feel like your dignity is attacked in some capacity, that you would feel angered by it or protective over that dignity as a Muslim, right? And we are in a country that doesn't, on a legal level at least, really respect Muslims or Islam, right? And we are in a country where, corporations are not really, you can't really trust them to do so. I think Delta does have many complaints, in general with their passing, not many complaints, but they have some controversies lately with their passengers.
I never fly Delta. I flew it one time. I got stuck in Michigan. I'll never fly it again. Ever. Screw Delta. Delta, if you're listening, I hate you.
You have like hundreds of thousands of flights a day. It's very possible that there's a chance there's Muslims who have never experienced anything while flying, but there's Muslims who have experienced something while flying.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I've flown like a lot in the past 10 years, and I had it in a previous episode with Kayem. We were talking about the SSSS thing on the tickets. I had that for like a good 4 or 5 years, right? Everywhere I go, and when I came off from overseas, I was escorted off and all these kind of things. But ever since 2013ish, alhamdulillah, like nothing. I travel a lot. I travel at least 2 times a month, maybe almost, right? On an airline. I've never had an incident ever.
Yeah, I don't want the thing is I don't want to stick to anecdotal evidence to disprove an anecdotal.
No, I mean, look, there's that one sister. A couple months ago, there's a sister named, I don't know if you heard of her, Zainab Merchant. She was getting harassed at every airport security line. They would take her off to the side and be very invasive in their search.
Yes, I remember that. Yes.
So we're not.
No, I know. I'm not saying you guys.
No. I just want to make our listeners to understand, because there's sometimes people kind of conflate us with some of the neoliberals out there, in the intellectual dark web who kind of say that, who kind of told this line where Muslims are crying wolf about everything. We're not
Yeah, no,
saying
no,
that at all. We're saying there are legitimate issues, and you have to make sure that in order for you to be taken seriously, you have to make sure
I
that
agree. I
the
agree.
most egregious events are kind of brought to light. You don't make yourself out to be a martyr for the
Yes,
most
yes, I agree.
mildest of infractions, you know? And
Yeah,
that's what I
no,
just
I
kind of want to drive.
definitely.
You can't just have it thrown
That is a
around
good
right.
point.
It's gonna be people. It'll delegitimize the legit cases.
You know,
right?
I agree. I agree. There is definitely an extra responsibility compared to, say, some random Twitter person talking about this and saying I experienced Islamophobia, and somebody like Khaled Baidoun. I do think when you're in a position of leadership or influence, you have a responsibility of being extra careful because your actions, what you say, can have a ripple effect
Yeah.
on your community. If it turns out that you're caught lying or you're caught, being if you say something irresponsibly, right?
You have to be the guy that I go to when I experience that. You know, you can't make yourself out to be the martyr. Even if
I get you.
know,
I
you know what I'm
definitely get
saying?
you. I can see definitely how it comes off as like, personal clout chase, not clout chase. I don't call it, but like, it's like
It just seems like a plea for
making it about
attention.
yourself type of thing.
Yeah, even.
But you know what though? This is a trick that a lot of people use to get more fame.
I agree. Yes.
No, we're not saying
I'm not
him
saying
in
Khaled
this.
is
Yeah, I
doing
don't know.
it.
Yeah,
I don't know about Khaled. I'm not
Yeah, I
saying
don't. Yeah, that's
Khaled.
why I don't want. Yeah.
But I'm saying that in general, we've seen people victimize themselves in order to get more followers, more attention,
Yeah.
right? And I'm saying if that is the intention, please do not do that.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you. And I think there's another element here too, on top of what I said. There is an element where it's a case of you're not crazy if this happens to you because it's happened to somebody as big as me as well, right? And it could be an opportunity to bring some exposure to this by using yourself as an example where it's verifiable or some capacity, right? I think the issue right now is I don't want to, I'm gonna have husn dhan, for him. I'm
Well,
assuming what he said happened. I'm gonna assume that in the respect, in the sense of that he's not manipulating the facts or anything like that. Allahu alam what actually happened, what the reality is, but that he sincerely believes this happened. I'll assume that, right? And so I don't want to make any declarative statements personally until like more information comes out. But I see both angles where I use myself as an example where I experienced this too. I know firsthand, and you're not crazy. I'm a person of influence, and it happens to me, even though I have 50,000 followers. If you're a Muslim, you're still at threat of this. I think that's a valid thought somebody can have. I think it's a difference in strategy. While I do tend to agree with what you guys are saying, actually, in terms of not to make yourself into a martyr, because I think it opens the doors for too much potential corruption or as a leader. I think people should stay away from that.
But part of living
for myself first and foremost as well.
Yeah, but part of living in America, one of the things I just kind of came across as a general attitude of Americans in general, maybe you can say white America, was that you do your best on your own. You try not to make excuses about other things, and you never try to ascribe blame for your own shortcomings to things like race or ethnicity or whatever you feel like you've kind of made some kind of a cognitive bias towards it. People respect you for you working hard so that you're successful. At least that's what I got when I was growing up here in the suburbs of Chicago. That's the feeling I always got as part of being American, that you don't blame things that necessarily don't need to be blamed. I mean, you don't make yourself a victim of circumstances in order to explain your shortcomings.
Yeah, this is the thing though. I think, like I said, there's an aspect of this as dignity. There's an aspect of it that's like victimization. I think victimization would be where you put yourself in a position of helplessness. I think that's victimization. I think a situation where you're upholding your dignity as a person or as a Muslim or what have you is when you don't accept that you are mistreated because of your deen. Like, you don't accept that this is something you have ghira over your religion and your identity of Islam. Like I think that's an honorable thing to some extent to have
Sure, but there has
nobility.
to
And
be.
I think an example of this is Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam. He did not want to leave prison, and the Prophet mentioned this. He said, Yusuf, Sayyidina Yusuf, was more patient than I was when he was offered to be taken out of prison. He said, no, I refuse to leave until my innocence is declared, right? And that aspect of that is part of that is your dignity, right? Like the dignity to be treated with the respect, to be seen in a respectful light, when you deserve to be seen, so right, when you deserve justice, it's okay, I think, to have, to be forward or move like very aggressive about that, because it is your justice at the end of the day, and that Allah has
I agree, but I think there has to be, as long as you're keeping in line with the civil and Islamic guidelines. I mean, look, we recognize that in today's day and age, there are definitely times when Muslims will be singled out, right? We know that there are definitely hate crimes, there's prejudice. We know that for a fact. We're not denying that. But how you act in that moment is very important. I'm not saying you cannot defend yourself, you cannot speak your truth. Absolutely. But just all I'm saying is keep in mind that when you do that, the world is watching.
Yeah.
Right. So make sure that the response that you give is something that you can stand in front of Allah and say, I did it because it was my dignity, but I also did it in defense of the community, not, out of rage or emotions. And I said something that was stupid.
I
Right.
yeah.
My point.
Yeah. This is interesting. I don't want to open up too much of a discussion, but it reminds me of, the situation of, do you forgive the Islamophobic attacker or do you take the legal actions against him, right? Where like, there's a situation where many Muslims, they'll go out of their way to forgive people who've hated or like, done hate crimes or have attacked them. Or do you, use them as an example of we're not to be dealt with, right? I think, this kind of goes into that somewhat, where we're in a situation where sometimes I think it's important to make an example. And this goes back to the other thing I was talking about with the influencers. They have two options. I think it's the same thing here, where if somebody harms you, there's two things. It's more honorable to forgive them in front of Allah, but it could also be more honorable, or there might be an obligation towards your community where this is something that deeply affects your community and people get away with it all the time. And this is a case where you can show as an example where you'll be punished if you do.
Well, this is what hudud is, right? Hudud is not meant to be what do you call, like, oppressive. It's meant to be something that is essentially, it serves as a reminder that people who do crimes will have to answer for them, right?
No, and I mean, like on behalf of the community, like you were talking about, when you stand in front of Allah, you say, I did this on behalf of the community. Like one aspect that's on behalf of the community is also like getting justice for yourself can be a means of benefiting your community.
Sure.
Right? Like, absolutely. So like Supreme Court cases, for example, right? If somebody did a Supreme Court case and that set a new precedent, that can actually help your community. With the cases for yourself, a situation that happened with you as an individual, but that can set a precedence for your community, where forgiving that individual, forgiving that situation may result in more harm for your community in the long run. You see what I'm getting at? Like I think there's two sides here. They both have some validity, but I think it's a really interesting discussion. I don't want to derail the other things we wanted to talk about too much, though.
Yeah. Guys, we got to wrap up now.
Okay.
Let's give a shout out to our sponsors. We lost our video, by the way. It's on our end, by the way.
They don't want us to end.
No. I was tinkering with something and I ended up breaking something. So we got to wrap up anyway.
Oh, okay.
halfourdeen.com is the website where you go for the private matrimonial experience. Go to halfourdeen.com and get your marriage profile set up in as little as 5 minutes. Are you on halfourdeen.com, Hossam?
No.
You should. You should get on there very quickly.
Get on it.
I'm good.
Come on, man. Why are you hating on my friend Bob Ali? He's working hard.
Oh yeah, I love Bob Ali. I forgot he runs that.
Yeah, he
remember
does.
When I was younger. He's the YouTube shows.
All right. WahidInvest.com is a website that was dedicated to halal investing. Make sure you go to WahidInvest.com and set up your profile so that you can invest your money and grow it in a halal manner. And finally, MyWasiya.com is a website created by none other than Sheikh Joe Bradford for the purposes of a Sharia compliant will. go to mywasiya.com and get your Islamic will created in as little as 15 minutes. And that being said,
wait, I just want to request from everybody.
Go ahead.
Two things. The issue in Sudan is still, escalating. It's not talked about very much at all. So please make dua for the people of Sudan and try to get informed about it, inshallah. The other thing is, can I share some of the links to? There's a documentary about the AIPAC lobby. Can we share that link somehow?
Absolutely, we'll put it in the description.
And there's a book about the Holy Land Foundation that's recently been written as well. So can we share that as well in the description? And the third thing is, can everybody, make dua for my dad, because they found 2 spots on his right liver, I think, and it could potentially be cancerous. So please make dua for him that it's not cancerous and that, Allah grants him shifa. He's a trooper. Whatever happens, he's going to be strong about it. But yes, please do make dua for him. Thank you.
Sorry to hear about that, Hussam.
No, it's okay. Like I said, he's a trooper. He's fine.
And lastly, the situation in Rohingya is always going on.
Yes.
Some of my friends
and the Uyghurs.
are going there and doing some relief effort in Rohingya, and it's just a terrible situation. And as well as the Uyghurs in China, East Turkestan, we're planning on doing an episode regarding that. We got some very intelligent person. Hopefully, inshallah, they come on and help everyone understand that situation a lot better. But Hussam, thank you so much for joining us this Mad Mondays. Let's do this more often, please.
Yes.
The floor is open. Man.
I'm not Palestinian, by the way, guys. People always ask me, "Are you Palestinian, Egyptian, or I'm Egyptian?"
I know
you care about Palestine. So
I mean, most of.
I'm Egyptian, sadly.
Madonia.
All right, fellas.
Very nice.
All right.
We'll see y'all this Thursday for Taboo Thursdays. For my friends Hussam and Mort, my name is Sim. We'll see you next week. Or this Thursday. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wait, are we off?